Okay. Okay, I think it's working. Okay, so let me begin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today we'll be having an asynchronous session in this introduction to area studies. I'm so sorry I was supposed to share this earlier to you, the video on the earlier hours at 10 a.m. But some things occurred during the recording process, so I would like to apologize for the delay of this video. So today we will be discussing about two main issues related to the modern geopolitics, as well as how Cold War eventually affected the development of modern geopolitical thought. This will be quite different with what we've discussed from the classical geopolitical thought. That is the idea of Alfred Mahan on the maritime geopolitics, the idea of heartland by half of Mackinder, and also the Speakman streamline idea. So this will be quite different because most of the modern geopolitical thinking was developed during the Cold War, and we can see that there are several arguments which try to forward an argument that classical understanding of geopolitics ends during the era of Cold War. But in my personal opinion, the Cold War does not or could not be seen as the end toward the classical understanding of geopolitics itself, but as a development and also an innovation toward the classical understanding of geopolitics. Uh, Another thing that I would like to emphasize is that due to the sporadic and also transboundary character of Cold War itself, which is not similar to the previous war like the World War II or any other classical war, uh, it actually enforces and also try to give countries new circumstances uh, that eventually pushes them to think the world in a different way. So in Cold War, we are not seeing that only two countries are what is it are trying to to find dominance, but instead they are trying to invite other countries to join the war and and to eventually win a cause over a certain ideology. What we are seeing in Cold War is pretty much was it not the same with the previous wars, and this eventually will lead to the rise of the new thinking in modern geopolitics. So Cold War and modern geopolitics are pretty much related to each other. This one is from the previous slide. Let me delete it first. I think that to make it clear, I need to delete the slide first. Sorry. Okay. So we will be discussing modern geopolitics for today, and so some part of more contemporary geopolitics. But I would like to start from the modern geopolitics. I quote this from the Saul Bernard Cohen book on geopolitics that I've shared to you in the Google Classroom. So Cohen said that there are at least two streams or two main thought in the modern geopolitical thought which are being developed during the Cold War. The first one is state-centered geopolitics, and the second one is universalistic approaches. What are the differences between these two? We will see it later. So the first one is state-centered geopolitics. So state-centered geopolitics was first founded during the early years of Cold War. We can see here that the victories of the World War II are talking to each other. And there's Stalin in the left side, there Harry Truman in the center side, and there's Winston Churchill in the right side. So we can see here that all of them are trying to converse about the future of international politics after World War II. They have agreed to create a United Nations, as an international organization in which we could manage the peace and also conflicts between countries in international politics. But after the World War II, they are not having a cordial relation as they were in World War II, because especially between UK, US, and Soviet Union, they are having different perceptions and different values about how international politics should be constructed. While the Soviet Union wanted the world to be constructed and to be uh, idealized within the vision of communism, uh, the United States and United Kingdom doesn't agree with that kind of thinking, because they are uh, trying to build a liberal world order, which is based on democracy and also founded upon the capitalist market system. So they are not okay with the idea of communism as a guiding principles in reconstructing the world after World War II. So uh, this kind of disagreement makes them separate further from each other, and they have negative perspective. They have put negative perceptions toward each other, uh, especially UK and US always considered Stalin to be one of the worst authoritarian leaders of this world. And so they are trying to protect Europe, Western Hemisphere, and the rest of the world by trying to impose liberal ideas and to stop communism from spreading around the world, especially in the Europe and Western Hemisphere. We can see that uh, in effort to do and also to strengthen their position in the international politics, UK and US has done many cooperation and also trying to develop some geopolitical maneuver and also creating some theories that could help them to develop a strategy that would be effective in dealing with Soviet Union. Um, One of the first theories and arguments that were being raised during the early years of Cold War is a theory addressed by George Kennan, that was assigned as a diplomatic officer of the United States in Moscow. At that time, after World War II particularly, George Kennan noticed that Soviet Union has increased their presence in Europe and Western Hemisphere. How they increase their presence? They are trying to provide assistance, economic assistance, and also political assistance to reconstruct countries which has been impacted by World War II. Uh, but they are also bringing their agenda of spreading communist narrative to the countries in Eastern Europe and also Western Hemisphere. They would like to dismantle the capitalist oppressive market system, which they think as undemocratic, and they would like to replace it with a new Soviet system that will totally undermine the liberal democracy and capitalist market system. Realizing this kind of vision, George Kennan trying to warn the U.S. government, and he said that Soviet Union should be contained by the United States with an adaptable, morally sound, and firm political strategy. Adopting the strategy of George Kennan, the United States government, together with the government from the Western Hemisphere as well as government in European countries, are trying to formulate a new plan that could be able to build uh, political capacity, economic and as well as economic stability in the region by establishing at least two kind of platforms. The first one is the European Marshall Plan, uh, which was part of the United States development aid toward European countries which has been suffering from economic crisis after the Cold War II, after the World War II. And also, there's also another plan implemented by the Americans, which is called as the Japanese Reverse Course, which serves as a program to contain Chinese and also North Korean influence in Japanese. And they are trying to construct a new constitution for Japan, which is entirely based upon the value of liberal democracy and also the value of capitalist market system. So as you can see here that Uncle Sam is trying to protect all of those regions, Pakistan, China, Japan, Israel, Europe, and USA, from the influence of the bear. The bear here symbolizes the United Socialist Soviet Republics. Yeah. Otherwise, the bear would become more larger, and the Uncle Sam could not do anything because the bear has already dominated the world. You can see here in this illustration. The second argument, which goes along with the Keenan's theory, is the Iron Curtain. This was a speech addressed by Churchill around the year 1947, I think. With this theory of Iron Curtain, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during the Cold War, is trying to define clearly and also to make a clear distinction between communist and non-communist countries in the Europe. So he is trying to contain the influence of Soviet Union by drawing a clear line between them. In order to help non-communist countries in Europe to protect their liberal and also their democratic identity, as well as their capitalist market system, Winston Churchill suggested that there should be a new unity in Europe that envisions protection of the liberated or liberal Europe and to keep the permanent peace in the region. So Churchill is trying to say that it is very important for European countries to create a regional organization that serves as a fortress to these liberal countries in order to face uh, the threat coming from the Soviet Union, or many would say that as a Red Scare. So here is the Iron Curtain. So the Iron Curtain basically was located between the Eastern European countries and also the Central European countries. So here we can see that several countries are included within the region of NATO. For example, there are British, there are Iceland, there are Portuguese, there are France, Italy, and Germany. Although several countries of the European nation continents did not join, such as Ireland, Finland, and Norway, they are trying to stay away from the political contestation between the NATO and also the Warsaw Pact. So you can see here that the red ones are the countries which adopts communism and also follow the common security treaty with Soviet Union. The interesting case is of course Yugoslavia, because they are not trying to align themselves with either Soviet or the Western Bloc, because they are trying to be an independent force within a divided Europe. So they are trying to build bridges between these two blocks, but they are mostly socialist, but they are not necessarily like Soviets, which adopt the ideology of Marxism and Leninism. They are adopting a different kind of socialism, which is sometimes called a Titoism or sometimes called as a Balkan style socialism, which is having a very quite large difference with the Soviet Union. Advancement of communism. Yes, talking about this again, there's a theory proposed by Bullitt, which was an American scholar, who is an American scholar that often talk about geopolitics and also political changes in international relations. So he proposed a theory that is called as a domino theory. So the domino theory is mainly arguing that the advancement of communism done by the Soviet and its allies in the Warsaw Pact is something that needs to be stopped, because it is dangerous for the sustainability of liberal and also capitalist market ideology. And that is why Bullitt is trying to help with the containment of the Soviet Union influence by categorizing countries. So he make three categorization of countries. The first one is, of course, the first world. The first world consisting of the countries which are located in Western Hemisphere. Western Hemisphere here is not just talking about the ideology, about the geographical location. So they are not necessarily have to be within the boundaries of Europe itself or within the boundaries of Eastern Europe, but they could be somewhere else. For example, they could be in the United States of America, they could be in Australia, they could be in New Zealand. So all of these countries which subscribe to the liberal and also capitalist ideologies were the parts of the Western Hemisphere. The second one is the communist countries, so-called communist countries, includes countries like Soviet Union, China, and many other countries in in Eastern Europe as the member of the Warsaw Pact. The third world consisting of countries like us, the developing countries, the country that was once being colonized by colonizers, and also pariah countries. Pariah countries doesn't necessarily have to be colonized countries. They can be independent, but they are mostly poor because of the economic condition and the lack of industries. Bullitt argued that the loss of one country in the First or Third War and the Third World might lead to another losses in neighboring countries. Uh, in one example, we could mention the example of Vietnam. So once Vietnam was being capitulated by the communist forces, the neighboring countries are following its steps to adopt the same ideology. Um, and this is also one of the proofs of the Domino theory. And in order to stop communism from spreading too far from the Indo-China region to the another Southeast Asian region, Southeast Asian nations like Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Indonesia is trying to build a new alliance that it was called as ASEAN. ASEAN, one of the main purposes and also the original intentions of the creation of ASEAN is to stop communism from becoming the dominant ideology in Southeast Asia. And of course, the ASEAN was also part of the bigger political play of the Western Hemisphere. Although we can see that ASEAN would be growing as an independent organization free of great power influences. So in order to understand Domino theory, I think you need to play a Rise of Nation as a game. If you didn't like it, just see the walkthrough in the YouTube. So this game would totally give you a very fresh perspective on how to conquer the world. So we are here in this game. We are choosing our side as Soviet. So we are trying to spread communism in all parts of the world. But in order to spread communism, we have to find a correct geographical location, which has its own population and also capacity and its differing resources. So you have to be aware of that before moving to another territory, because otherwise you cannot what is it? You cannot do your best in conquering another territory. So I suggest you to play this. If you find the price of the game is too expensive at the Steam, you can just find it from any place from somewhere else. Okay. So next is the Kissinger's linkage theory. So what is this telling about? So Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State during the era of Cold War. He was a very infamous United States Secretary of State because he was said to have a huge play in many regional crises, and he also drive several of the American intervention in Latin America, Asia, and also Africa. So he is saying that all parts of all troubled spots are connected to Soviet Union. And Henry Kissinger argued that it is very crucial that America took an involvement or took initiative to intervene in any single conflict in order to balance Soviet's influence. That is why America was behind the G30S. Yeah. America was behind G30S because they didn't want to see communism from being a dominant ideology in Indonesia. So they are trying to install a new government by first staging a trial coup, which is not necessarily a coup then. Yes. So you have to understand that the history of countries, especially during the Cold War, was really being influenced by the the contestation of the great powers, that is the Soviet Union and also the United States. Okay. Zbigniew Brzezinski. So I would like you to know this name. Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski was an American strategist which had a Polish origin. So he came from Poland. His ancestors come from Poland to the United States, and then he settled there. And there's a Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's a very prolific IR scholar. So he said that in order to understand the context of the global politics during Cold War, we have to understand that there is a thing that is called as a Eurasian struggle. What is Eurasian struggle? Eurasian struggle means that the international political struggle um, will be having its important course and also its important episodes in Eurasia. Why Eurasia? Because Eurasia is a very strategic location. Yeah, and America should exert control within the linchpin states. So, what are the linchpin states? The linchpin states are states who have significant geographical position in the Eurasia, which enable them to exert economic or military influences. Who are those linchpin states? So we will be looking into that. I would like you to make your guess on the chat box in YouTube. Please do comment whether you know these countries, this blind map. So I would like to give some clue. So the first country was located in the part of the Western Europe or Central Europe. The second one is located between the Middle East and Central Asia. The third one is located between Central Asia and South Asia. The fourth one is obviously the neighbor of the first one. The fifth one, you know it, because there's a particularly far bigger island in the south. You should know that. And the sixth one is a neighbor to the third country. I think you can guess it very much quickly. Okay, so coming up to the universalistic approach. So what is the universalistic approach? Universalistic approach is the approach that was developed by scholars, not by states. So the main differences between the state-centric approach and also the universalistic approach is that state-centric approach was mainly designed as a theory in order to help a country to develop a strategy. But the universalistic approach is trying to see a problem in academic perspective and also trying to review a problem in an objective manner without serving to the interests of the state. So it's a purely academic work. So at the first point, it is very important for you to know Modelski, which proposed the idea of the long cycle of power. Uh, Modelski is trying to say that world powers are always striving for hegemonies and they are always succeeding each other in the pursuit of the hegemony of international politics. And all of the things that are occurring in the international politics, it could be war, economic crisis, and also a geopolitical contestation are the product of long cycle in the international politics. So we can see here the examples of the long cycle theory, which is trying to explain that uh, there are always change in the word hegemon. For example, we can see that from the end of 14th century to the end of the 15th century, we can see that Portugal was the hegemon at the time because they have a large maritime fleet they have large merchant ships, and also they have a very big armada, which could help them to conquer many parts of the world, and also obtaining many valuable resources such as spices and also golden from regions in Asia and Africa easily. But their hegemony would soon be challenged by Netherlands because they have the VOC, which is the Dutch version of the East Indian companies. They are dominating world trade at that time, and because of their dominance in the Indonesia, and they are really taking the maximum profit from Indonesia at the time. But they will soon be changed by the British because British has more larger colonized territory in the world, and they successfully managed it quite well without any serious kind of problem. That is why they could uh, survive to become world hegemony for past 3 to 4 years. But after the World War II, United States was replacing British as world power. Yeah, we can see the reason why. And recently, we can see that China is also rising with all of their digital capacity, and also their very complicated statecraft, which helps them to develop a very unique kind of governmental system that could be contributing to their rise as hegemon in international politics. Another thing that I would like to explain is the theory that was proposed by Wallerstein. Emmanuel Wallerstein was a professor in America. So he's trying to propose a theory that is called as what system. So what is what system? What system is a system in which the core countries, which is located in the Western Hemisphere and highly advanced industrial countries, is always trying to impose their capitalist system to the semi-periphery and periphery country, and to obtain maximum profits from these countries by extracting their raw materials and human resources. So you can see here that core has a power to produce high quality materials by high quality industrial materials by using raw materials coming from the periphery and semi-periphery countries. So mostly core countries are those countries which has most countries which have industrial plant, a very diversified industrial complex in their own country. So they would be able to produce quality products, even though that the raw materials to make that certain product is coming from semi-periphery and periphery. So semi-periphery was mostly the countries which experience a moderate a moderate industrial growth, but they are still surviving to do that. And there is a very free country as well. Periphery was mainly contributing the raw materials and labor to the core countries, yeah, because mostly they are impoverished country, they are pariah countries, so they are not having enough capability to manage their own resources, and therefore the core is using that to be able to enrich themselves from the suffering of the periphery. So this is a pretty much a critical theory by Immanuel Wallerstein. So we can see here in the map, but this map is only, what is it? Could only be considered as something true during the Cold War, because the map is changing right now. Because we can see that Russia is not anymore a periphery country. China is not anymore a semi-periphery country. It has turned to be a country that is a core one. We can also hear that most African countries are currently trying to level up their industrial scale, so they are becoming semi-periphery as well. So this map is not pretty much relevant because of the changing context of international politics. Okay, coming to the contemporary geopolitics, what I would like to first explain is the theory of the Huntington of Samuel Huntington that argued for the theory of class of civilization. So he said that each geography has its own geocultural distinctiveness, which actually leads to to the different cultural value and different identities, and this kind of difference would stem a new conflict, would cause a new conflict between religions and also between civilization. Here we can see that Huntington is trying to divide the world into one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, and civilization, which has different what is it, point of view. And we can see the example of Western Unorthodox. Western Unorthodox are simply Christian society, but they are having a very different value about politics, about authoritarianism, about democracy. So Orthodox are mostly obedient to the states because they are trained to do so. But in the Western countries, which are more liberal and they are mostly subscribing to the Protestant teaching, they are having much more liberty than the Orthodox one. So that is the thing that you need to remember. I will discuss it further later in the class of the regional and international relations after this semester, inshallah. Yeah. The last one is the Brzezinski chessboard. He said it's chessboard because this is the place where the great power is always trying to play. So Brzezinski chessboard is happening currently in the circled area, which is called as the Eurasian Balkan. So Brzezinski said that America, as well as its a natural military partner, is trying to expand their influence in that certain area. And we can see here that the provision and also the prophecy coming from the Brzezinski is true enough, because this country would not be the conflict that is happening in this region could not be easily solved. Why? Because there are ethnic difference, because there are historical legacy, because there are energy politics playing within the area. So we can see, for example, one of the flashpoints and also zone of conflicts in this area is what? One of the example is the Armenia and Azerbaijan conflict, for example. Another thing is that Afghanistan, they're still having conflict between the Pashtun and between the Pashtun and also Hazara. Here we can see in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, they are always fighting over water. Yeah. So it is very important for America to know the condition and also the political dynamics in this country in order to be able to intervene. Because otherwise, in next 5 years, the country will be continuing as well, because there's still no kind of end game in the region because of the historical legacy as well as the problem of national interest. Okay, that's it for me. If you have any questions, please add in the chat box and comments, and I will happily answering to all of your questions. Assalamualaikum.